I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Where are our prophets now? Where are those messages God chooses to communicate divine revelation through? In the past, the Creator has sent prophets like Abraham, Siddhartha, Jesus, Muhammad, and many more. Maybe our higher power has switched tactics since we reinterpret God's words as soon as the Creator's prophets leave us. Could it be that Spirit talks to each one of us individually and we haven't learned to listen? On Words of the Prophets, our modern prophets show us how to find the internal prophet that is the I Am, and we discuss the application of spiritual principles in all aspects of our lives. Love and light, everybody. I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Today, my guests are Dr. Yolanda Briscoe, who is the clinical psychologist and executive clinical director of the Santa Fe Recovery Center. Greetings.
Thank you.
And we have Sadhu Singh Khalsa, who is the founder and director of the Total Health Recovery. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
And today our topic is going to be what sustains you from the inside. This topic, this line, comes from the invitation, which is a statement made by Indian elder Oriah Mountain Dreamer. And part of that statement is which follows. It doesn't interest me where or what or with whom you have studied. I want to know what sustains you from the inside when all else falls away. I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company you keep in the empty moments. What we're going to do today, Dr. Briscoe has been with me, I guess it was 2 or 3 months ago, we did a show on substance abuse. And Sadhu is also in that field, but we're going to expand beyond that field. What sustains you from the inside is meant to be not only individual, but collectively. And that's the question. What I want to look at today is going to be a little bit probably more clinical with some spiritual undertones, which is that we are treating people as criminals who have mental health issues. And maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago when we didn't understand what we know now, that might have been acceptable. But to me, that's not acceptable anymore. We've learned a lot of it from initially treating substance abuse, and it's expanding outward. How our brain works, things we experience, call it karma, if you will. And I really believe it is, and I believe these people actually volunteer to do this stuff to teach us something. But you've heard that from me a lot. Let's just get the audience a little bit of simple introduction to both of you. Dr. Briscoe, you want to go first? Just let them know who you are and what you are and why you're here, so to speak.
Okay. I'm here because you asked. Whatever you asked.
That's too easy.
Well, I've been the director of the Santa Fe Recovery Center. On May 12th, we will be celebrating our 5th year.
Great.
And I have the distinct honor and pleasure of working as the director there and being part of an amazing team. And having the privilege, and again, the honor and a lot of gratitude around being able to work with individuals who are in recovery and are seeking recovery and witnessing the amazing transformation from somebody in the depths of their misery and just really depressed and hurting and in a lot of pain, and seeing that transformation 30 days later into the beautiful, amazing person that they are, but that person had been lying dormant.
Would you consider that a demonstration of, and we haven't talked anything spiritually before, but would that cover or be covered by God's grace? The ability to heal, to transform, regardless of where we've been?
Oh, absolutely. That somebody has that inside them. And, like Helen Keller said, that everything that you need is inside of you, and you just have to tap into it. And certainly, it's there. Like I said, the beautiful person is there. They just haven't, the person has been lost for a while.
So this insight has come while working in the field. You've seen near impossible cases transform.
Every day.
Yeah, I don't want to get into my story. I've talked about it on the air, but I was a drug addict. I'm a recovering drug addict, and I was a hope to die drug addict, and it's just like, we do transform. Anybody has the ability to heal, and it's a matter, I believe, of giving them the opportunity. But I don't want to keep getting redundant. I don't want to get too preachy. So you guys are going to have to interrupt me and stop me because this is something I just get very passionate about. Sadhu, you want to give a little introduction?
Sure. My name is Sadhu Singh Khalsa. I currently am the founder and director of Total Health Recovery Program, and I do mean total health recovery. Anyone that comes to me, I take it as an opportunity, and I understand that they're sent, quote, by the Home Office, that they're
Yes.
coming through a certain portal to have a transformative experience. And so once you asked me if I could say something, and I said, if you don't see God in all, you don't see God at all. That's one. And the second one is that we're spiritual, and people have heard this a lot, we're spiritual human beings having a spiritual experience in a human body. And so I'm very alert and responsive to the fact that who's walking in the door is an amazing human being. And one time they asked Michelangelo, how did he create these statues? And he did these beautiful artworks, and he said, I just removed the unessential aspects of it. So in the healing process, my understanding is the contract with any client that I have is a spiritual contract, and that the task is transformation and healing, not symptom abatement. And so that's a very, very different approach in chemical dependency work. So we're working at the cellular level, rebuilding the cellular level, excuse me, strengthening the nervous and glandular system, working on psychological, emotional, and transgenerational issues, and connecting them to source.
Can I ask you to take all those terms and break them down for the audience? Because I know Yolanda and I definitely understand that we're in the field. There are going to be people who don't really clear what every one of those terms are.
The simplest way I could say that, let's see. That, and I'll say it this way, but it's God and me and God are one. So when I'm meeting anyone else, they're the same part of the oneness of the creation, and that's the respect and concern, and to bring together a staff that has that as a philosophical orientation, a treatment orientation, and is highly alert and responsive to any changes they're making. It is a continuing dialogue to get at the core issues and to work with them for the healing process. So it's a contract around consciousness, because Bruce Lipton, one of the, I think, neuroscientists who worked at Stanford in the stem cell research, found out in his research that genetic determinism is seriously flawed. And what I mean by that is everyone carries genes for cancer, but they get activated in a certain way. And that one's thinking changes one's biochemistry and changes one's behavior. So for me, consciousness is the core issue, to increase awareness and consciousness as the major part of the treatment plan.
So I am a drug addict. I didn't necessarily have genetic predisposition. What I had was a body that was susceptible to a point where if you put enough stuff in it, it's going to react to it. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have to have the gene to be there. Mm-hmm. I kind of like grew my own gene. It was kind of homegrown, so to speak. And how does that expand out to other behaviors?
What is that saying? You take one drink and then the drink takes you. I forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah. That there's many ways to addiction. There can be genetic, it can be environmental, it could be social, it could be familial, it could be many things. But what I look at are, and with the assessment devices that I have, we see where the imbalances are in any part of the total human being. And then one of them is a voice recognition pattern that I can talk to you more about later. It shows where the stress is in the body and what the emotional issues are. And that gives us a great start at where to begin, no matter what the cause was. And then there's the biological assessments and things like that. So the cause of it, it's less important than getting an understanding of what it is and to go forward with that. And that happens on a minute-by-minute interaction.
So would it be fair to say, let me pop in here with a definition, because I want to throw this in here. What we're here to talk about is really restorative justice, because right now I think we're really in a system of retribution as opposed to restorative. Mm-hmm. And let me define that. Restorative justice is a systematic response to wrongdoing that emphasizes healing the wounds of victims, offenders, and communities caused or revealed by the criminal behavior. Would it also be fair to say that there is a wound that creates that behavior beyond the fact that the behavior creates a wound? You know what I'm saying? Does that make any sense?
Are you talking about the globally or the individual?
Individual.
Okay, the individual is definitely some wounding there.
So we don't have criminals
histories.
who act out just because of nothing.
No.
There's a cause and effect at all times.
People do not act with bad behaviors because they just want to be bad. It's kind of what they know, or you look at histories. I just talked to, on Saturday, it was my day off, and I got a phone call that one of the individuals who had been in and out of prison for years was starting to act out, had cussed at one of the med techs and had been, some of the other clients were afraid of him. And our philosophy is that anybody who comes in there is going to be treated the same way, whether you come in there and you pay cash or somebody else or the state is paying for your services. But this individual, and if you look at his history and you think this was a 3-year-old who was pulled out of his bed nightly and beaten and has been in the system since he's 3 years old, in and out of locked facilities since he was a little boy. How else he is being how he knows how to be. And so we're not going to ask somebody like that to leave because that's why he's there. He needs our love, he needs our support, he needs to be treated with kindness. Maybe the first time anybody's ever held him in not literally because we can't hold our clients, but held in his pain and treated him with the compassion and the kindness that perhaps this may be the first time he's ever experienced it. And that's the transformation. You put this individual back in, we ask him to leave and he gets put back in jail, he'll never get it. He's not going to get that. So we have to work really, really hard. Unless we're working harder than the client at some point, then maybe this isn't the place for you, if it's affecting the whole community. But in 5 years, we've only had 2 fights in 5 years. And we have people from all walks of life. And I think because if you treat somebody with kindness and you treat them with compassion, by and large, they will rise up to it. They want to be treated kindly. They want to be kind.
They don't even sometimes know what that feels like or how to respond to it. And there's an awkward response at the beginning.
Yes.
Because they, you get these messages that we should know how to do these things. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's some inherent ability to do it, but sometimes it's so buried, you need to chip away little by little to let that spirit shine out, so to speak, and that, And
we're all connected. I am him and he is me. Like Thich Nhat Hanh, who talks about how I am the 12-year-old who jumps out of the ship when she was raped, and I am the pirate who raped the child, because who knows what happened to that pirate. We're all connected.
Exactly. I can tell you wanted to say something.
Well, that's true. And so because we're in the human body and because we're in society, there are rules and regulations that govern behavior. And so when there's a transgression or a criminal act, then the society deals with that. And a level up from that is the spiritual domain, which has a different assumption and a different response. And that is, everything that happens to anyone is perfect in the moment. And that whatever that is, it's a soul lesson. This is hard to do in the community level, But at a spiritual level, these are like diseases that come to people, bankruptcy, violence, and so forth. At a spiritual domain, it may be looked at differently, that this is part of the growth of the soul. And therefore, there's not judgment about it. At the human court level, there's judgments about it. But at a spiritual level, that may just be karma, it may be payback, it may be what that soul needs for the development. And that's a harder, for most people, a harder level to get to about that. And if you're in that level, then you handle it differently.
Are there not levels in between? I mean, can we not find compassion without having that understanding of karma? Can we not see, from the stuff we are learning about neurobiology, about the way that your brain is affected in childhood by abuse, that
well, I think
we
that
can find the compassion without actually having that deeper understanding?
Yeah, that's what Yolanda is saying, that the premise is you treat everyone with respect and compassion who walks in the door. That's the beginning, that's the base level of interaction, is appreciation that God's in that person as well. Okay, so that's not there, but the court system and so forth has its rules and regulations about how to handle certain kinds of behavior. And that is a reflection of the people themselves who elect those officials. So that they're only doing what the mass consciousness is about acts of violence.
We're feeding off the fear.
It's all about fear.
Yeah.
I've met with several judges and trying to do education about what addiction is, that it's not going to be solved by going to jail. And their response by and large is, these are kind people. These are not bad guys. The judges who determine that somebody goes into jail. Individuals who care about, and this is what I hear, I care about my children and my wife, and somebody out there ramming into them and killing them. And so these are not people who are not compassionate, but this is the law, like you were saying, and if you violate the law, then you have to go to jail. So the system from the very top has to be restructured because it's not working. We had one individual, sweet guy, he had endeared himself so much to the local jail that when they brought him and he was in shackles, they were all giving him high fives. Okay, buddy, good luck. We hope you get in. He was a neat guy. So did the assessment and determined that he was appropriate to come into treatment. Through some fluke, they let him out on a Friday, a Super Bowl weekend. What do you think happened?
He got drunk at Super Bowl.
Yes.
Of course.
Monday morning has to report to the probation officer, and he gets put in jail.
Yeah.
We called and we said, this young man needs to be in treatment. He doesn't need to be in jail. The response was, he needs to learn his lesson. Put him in jail for a few days, and maybe he'll learn his lesson. Well, he's already been in jail for a few days several times, and that's not working. So we've got to do something different.
Right. And the resistance to do something different is the crux of the matter. Because everyone knows that the recidivism in prisons is 70%. Yet, do they implement more treatment programs inside a prison? Do they put money to that? No, they do a little. And they already showed that makes every dollar spent on treatment is a $7 return to their benefit. Yet they're still resistant to do it. So in the prison system, you have punishment as the main mission of the prison system, not treatment. And you can get in the prison, you can try and do a little treatment, but they do not support treatment at that level that they support punishment. So as long as they're reading the mindset of the community that we need to punish people, then they punish people and treatment becomes secondary. And that's why you get a 70% recidivism rate.
It's almost a catch-22. You're asking a society that's traumatized to have compassion for people who are traumatized, and the only thing they live in is fear.
Yes.
And it's all about fear. That somehow, by allowing people to be treated and allowing people to get treatment, that somehow you're soft on crime, and that you're, but really treatment is doing something. It's not like you're not doing anything. You ask somebody to go, but you can, the judges also try to put people into treatment, and we have 23 beds in Santa Fe County.
Right.
They refer them to treatment, but there just aren't enough facilities. And so they wait and wait and wait and sit in jail and sit in jail and sit in jail. Meanwhile, learning new types of behavior, getting addicted to new types of drugs and things they hadn't tried before.
Two separate issues, and I'll walk whichever path the two of you decide you want to walk. I want to get a little educational here in two areas. One, spiritually, and we could talk, in this community, which is predominantly Christian in nature, we could talk about what the Gospels teach, and what the Gospels teach is the same thing that every other religion teaches. And the other part of it is I want to get into a little bit the clinical aspects of the impact of trauma, how the brain functions, how the body reacts to stress, and what that really does to us. So which one do you want to?
I'll do the clinical.
Let's start the clinical. Yeah.
Well, clinically, what happens to the brain is the entire brain is affected. The amygdala, which deals with emotion, every single part of the brain is affected by trauma and addictions. If you can do CAT scans on somebody who's high, and you see what is happening to the brain, and they're forever altered. They've done tests with rats to show how your brain is altered when you are addicted to cocaine, and a little rat will go against every evolutionary cue that they have. It becomes pretty primitive. Where going towards the light, you will die, and they will continue to go towards the light to get the cocaine. So it's insidious that what happens to your brain. Now with the trauma, if you've been traumatized, you continue to be re-traumatized. The brain remembers highly emotionally charged incidences, which is sometimes, well, as a parent, you think, why do they only remember the bad stuff that happened to them? But that's why, because if something's really emotionally charged, then you will feel that. So you will continue to be re-traumatized every time you experience any kind of pain or discomfort that occurs throughout your life. It's the fear is re-triggered. There's fight, flight, and now they've added freeze, which is primitive. How we have been through evolution, how we react to being threatened. Some of us being threatened, and so if you've been traumatized and you've been beaten or abused or sexually molested or whatever has happened to you, that will be your natural response to be scared, either fight or flight, maybe use drugs and alcohol to stop the pain, or freeze and not do anything and not become the fully evolved person that you can be.
Let me throw out a scenario and see how you both feel about it. Child is abused. Is it an abusive household? So fight or flight is really a series of biochemical reactions that I believe are divinely given to us to deal with crisis without the intention of ongoing regular crisis. So a child in early childhood, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, up until the mid-teens, your body is still forming. Mm-hmm. So you wind up in a place where you're being traumatized and you're having a system that's not meant to be used constantly, especially when it's being formed, being kicked in to be used. So a child is living in an abusive household. Daddy's a rageaholic. We don't even get into the rest of the stuff. Doesn't know what he's going to expect every time daddy comes home. Sits there in fear. That triggers the system. After a while, the system breaks down because it's not designed to be sustained, especially in the formative years, as an ongoing use. It's there to be occasionally used. I mean, designed for cave people. You ran into a saber-toothed tiger. Let's get out of here. So the chemical process, one of two things happens. We either start something up and we can't turn it off, or we so deplete it that it never turns on again. And the rest of the way these function then leads to other mental health disorders, which then lead to depression, anxiety, manic, and then we wind up using or acting out behind that as a means to just get away from that. Is that a valid scenario?
Oh yes, and the cortisone levels that are constantly being risen, and the stress levels that we weren't meant to be in constant stress. An animal feels stress for a short period of time. It sees a lion, it takes off, and then it calms down, and it's laying down very calmly. But we weren't made that way. And talking about a child, our frontal lobes aren't even completely finished until we're at least 25 years old. Particularly for a male, it takes longer. And when is the period that most kids are starting to act out or not act, start using drugs and alcohol, is a period when their frontal lobes, which is the executive functioning, isn't even completely developed.
So it's not unreasonable to take on antisocial behaviors behind that kind of background.
Okay. So now you got another aspect of this. And so I'm going at this about what we put in our body and how it upsets our mental functioning.
Okay.
And that's around food. Okay. So the food industry uses 15,000 chemicals in the preparation of food. And of course, their main motivation is profit, and they get more profit by having larger shelf life. And to get more shelf life, they have to put in preservatives into the food and red dyes. Okay. So they've been showing that this amount of assault to the nervous and glandular system through the preservatives and through the chemicals is literally blowing people's minds, and that they know how to make food, the substances, to make it addictive, and they know that heavier people eat more than light people. So the whole effect of how the food industry processes its food is contributing to the mental instability of the youth. So that's one thing that comes from outside, that because we are what we eat. Everybody knows that. And when you go to the grocery store and you can't read the words they're using there, the chemicals, that is affecting our mental capacity, our nervous system, our stress levels, and so forth. That's one level. So the major treatment of most people is through the pharmaceuticals, and they've been very good at defining life as a problem that needs to be medicated. Okay, so so one of the studies that was by a MD doctor, Dr. Barbara Starfield, in JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association, in the year 2000, said that medical care is the third leading cause of death in the United States. Now you talk about justice, okay? So she said 100,000 people die a year from the correct use of medications, and 125,000 die from medical error and hospital infections. You never hear about that on the 6 o'clock news. 100,000 a year, that's twice Vietnam, every single year, because in every bottle of medication you take, the side effects are bigger than the benefits, because all those medications are toxic to the liver. So now you got an assault from food. You don't feel good. You go to the doctor and they give you medications and it makes you sicker. And a lot of depression is related to the food that you're taking and how it's affecting serotonin and dopamine and peptides. So you've got, and then cell phone radiation is another thing that's creating incredible health problems. And they show that if you put 3 cell phones together and you put an egg in the middle, that egg will get cooked in about a minute and a half and you can see it. So we're under tremendous assault from radiation, from food, from chemical toxicity in our environment. These things are affecting our physical and mental health. And that never really gets talked about. So we get the end product. We get people that can't tolerate that kind of assault on their nervous and glandular system, and we say they're the patient and they're sick and needing help.
Will this assault lead to antisocial behavior, acting out, whether it be domestic violence, whether it be, taking another life? I mean, is there any way to not go to those depths?
They're just starting to see now that the antidepressants for teenagers can lead to suicide and homicide. And so if you look at the cases where those major tragedies were at the Indian Reservation and Columbine, those kids were on medication. But again, if you don't see it that way, you don't look at that for a causative factor.
It's interesting you said that, because there was a study couple of months or so ago, came out of Rutgers University. And instead of a medical doctor, it was actually a doctor of archaeology who started this study. I forget her name, but it was interesting because one of the known side effects of antidepressants is the inability to function sexually.
Yes.
What her study has shown was not only does antidepressants in fact impact sexual function, it impacts the ability to be intimate and romantic.
Now, isn't that depressing?
Yes!
And you're taking a pill for it?
Exactly. So you've got a whole society out there who's taking these medications who,
Yes.
on all levels, cannot, because of the medication they're taking, connect to another human being. And that scares the hell out of me.
So if you have the trauma and then you disassociate, and if you've been sexually abused, it's very difficult to be in the body. If you can't be in the body, you can't be present, and you can't embody spirit. So this comes full circle on so many different levels about what the treatment is for these kinds of things that are happening. And it has to be holistic, and it has to be multi-modality and multi-dimensional, because it's not just one thing that's getting out of balance.
Well, let's define those terms again. Holistic, multidimensional, and because again, I mean,
I forget because this is always in my head all day long. So
Yeah.
This is how I talk and think.
define holistic. Let's just start with that.
Okay, basically, it is a approach that includes physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual component parts, and that the modalities are okay. Many programs hire a massage therapist and say we're a holistic program. Okay, so that's a token sliver of a philosophical approach about who we are. You know, what is our cosmology? What is our belief system? How do we connect to source? So a holistic program has the understanding that we're body, mind, and spirit. We're not just physical bone and blood running through us. That we're spiritual human beings having a human experience. Well, if that's part of the orientation, then you start to look at exactly what that individual needs, because they're frequencies. We're all energy and we're frequencies. So if there's an imbalance, you find out the imbalance, and therefore some of the devices that I use restores the balance at the energetic level in the body. It's hard to make it simple. It's, I'm struggling to find the words to make that simple, to make it simpler. It's not just saying that we're going to have an AA meeting and we're going to go to a group and it's not a canned program. In the moment, it is absolutely every different intervention is based upon the response to the last intervention, energetically, emotionally, physically, mentally, and spiritually. And that's how a program that really delivers to the needs of that individual is put together, not just by words and say, we have all these different, it is by your response to the treatment determines what you get next.
Ongoing evaluation.
In the moment.
Yes, okay. Is that implementable on a, you run a treatment center, it's government funded, and one of the, I think the most destructive terms ever created in all of this whole healing process was evidence-based. How does that work? I mean, does evidence-based really work, or is it just a Band-Aid over a sore?
Well, you have to do all of the above. Like you were saying, it's not just one thing. You certainly want to, first of all, do no harm. And evidence-based is so you want to do practices that you want to have a 12-step program, because that's what tends to work. But you do want to deal with the entire body and the person. We frequently say, and I have it up on my bulletin board, this is a sacred place.
Yes.
We do not talk ill of anybody. We do not talk ill of our competitors. We do not talk ill about ourselves. It's a sacred place, and we hold it sacred. And so you have to take the whole person and not just look at that one thing. So skills are needed, just like when you drive a car, you have to learn how to use the shifts. And so there are some skills. So those would be the evidence-based practices. The other piece is where we can then bring in the human side, and where our counselors, we were able to hand pick our counselors, and that were in keeping with that type of mentality about the spirituality and dealing with a person with kindness and compassion, and individuals really rise up to that. And so we had, interestingly, last week we had somebody who had been to some very expensive treatment centers 2 other occasions, and he, after one of our graduations, which we're not calling graduations anymore, we're going to call them transitional ceremonies, because graduation sounds like you're done,
Yeah.
but when you're in recovery, you're not done. So it's a transitional ceremony that we're having. And afterwards, he came to me and he says, I've been to these fancy places, but this is the first time I'm having a spiritual awakening. You've got a wonderful staff. And I said, you know what? In the Buddhist tradition, when the pupil is ready, the teacher will appear. Mm-hmm. It's you. You are ready now. It's you tapping into you.
It's bringing something to me that I'm ready for, but then that also has to be out there and available.
Mm-hmm. But how do you write that in a grant? What we do is we traffic. That's to touchy-feely, or how do you operationalize spirituality? And so we can use those terms for funding purposes, and then how we do the work. Then that's where you really see the transformation.
So here's my hit on evidence-based.
Go ahead.
There's a couple things. If you have anecdotal evidence that something's working, and you go to the research institutes to try and get research done on what you think could be helpful, it is extremely difficult to get funding for something they're not familiar with. It's like I say the world's round and you say it's flat, and I'm going to come to you for funding to prove that the world's round. You can't even get the grants to do that. That's one thing. The second thing is what I said before. Evidence. If we're really following evidence-based, then what do you do when 125,000 people die a year from the correct use of medication, and that's giving them, quote, the best medication for that diagnosis, and you got that many deaths happening, and what did they do with that? So there's my opinion, there's a suppression of techniques that can help people, and there's a over support of things that are very harmful to people that politically they don't want to look at. And so you got a justice issue there, you got an allocation of resource issues there, and you definitely got treatment issues there.
Do we have any, I know there's always hope. Do we have any realistic short-term hope that we're going to change this? I mean, that's why I wanted to do this show, because I wanted to put this out there, because I've been in this field now for 16, 17 years, and I watch the field get sicker, not healthier, because of managed care, which to me is a contradiction in terms, and all the stuff evidence-based, I mean, I have a hard time with it. And I don't see it, what you're saying, I think it's hurting more than it's helping, and you're forcing people to fit into modalities that are Band-Aids. I mean,
yes.
I don't want to get too deep into this, but I mean, I was in this field before managed care and before the concept of systemic, models. So it wasn't about the quick fix. My favorite, you guys ever watch Star Trek: The Next Generation?
All the time.
So you remember the show, there's this little kid who poisons his brother, and the brother gets put into this bubble because his whole immune system has been...
Yeah, I remember that, yes.
Okay, so now she comes down to him, and they need to get him to a space hospital because she doesn't have, Dr. Beverly doesn't have the care necessary on the Starship, on the Enterprise to take care of him, but the Enterprise gets hijacked. So this kid is dying, and it has a happy ending. But anyway, at one point she comes down to him, and she goes, "How you doing?" And he goes, "Well, if I raise my hand like this, it hurts." And her response was, "Don't raise your hand." And that to me is what systemic therapy is about. It doesn't heal anything. It doesn't solve anything. If raising your hand hurts, keep your hand at your side. And that to me is that, that That to me is evidence-based. Yeah, of course it's not going to hurt. I'm going to feel fine as long as I don't have to raise my hand.
But we keep doing the same thing. We keep building more prisons because there's money involved in that. And you see that the majority of the women that are in prison are there because of drug-related
Yes.
charges. So you are having somebody sit in this cell because they have an addiction problem. Not bad people, but in there because they're addicts. And by and large, people of color. And so what do you have? And these are not, I should have said this at the beginning, these are not the opinions of the Recovery Center. These are my personal opinions, but it's pretty much modern day slavery is what it is, because that's not who's being affected by drugs and alcohol. It affects all walks of life, all colors, but the majority are people of color in prisons.
I mean, we are called upon to not judge, to not condemn, to demonstrate mercy, and to forgive. I mean, to me, that is a basic of every religion. You know, and I've studied them all. You know, I mean, we don't listen to that. So, I mean, to me, I hear what you're saying, but to me, it goes beyond just drug addicts. It goes to the people who are, you know, whether they're pedophiles, whether they're murderers, whatever they are, they're human beings having, there's a spirit inside that's asking to be taken care of, to be nurtured, to be allowed to grow. And I'm not saying we let people out on the street when they can hurt society, but we're putting them into institutions that do nothing more than warehouse them, have no concern whatsoever for the change, the restoration that we started talking about, and then we put them back out there in the streets and wonder why we have a 70% recidivism
And now
rate.
they have a record, and so getting a job is close to, it's
Exactly.
almost impossible now to get a job when you don't have a record. But coming out, and what is your experience? You've been in jail and you've got a record. Who's going to hire you? And so the parents are in the jail, the kids are out here, and it just continues generation after generation. And there's got to be something different. We were not made to be in prisons. You know that the ships are safe in harbors, but that's not what ships were made for. Yeah, they're safe, but that's not what people were made for, to be in cells.
Yeah, I mean, if you take them away to give them some healing, and if the healing takes a year, it takes a year. If it takes 5 years, it takes 5 years. But I mean, work towards something, not just punishment. Retribution does not work.
Or if it did, we wouldn't have to keep building prisons.
Exactly, and then we are a
That's as
society
basic.
that does that. We have the most violence. You know, I'm sometimes when I get into these shows, I start losing my hope in the future of this culture.
That's why it takes a change in awareness and consciousness, and it has to come from the grassroots level. It's not going to come from the top, because the vested interest is to keep things the way they are. It's never going to come from the top. All the things that you see around holistic things now coming in medical care didn't come from the AMA and hospitals getting together and say we should have holistic programs. It came from people paying out of pocket to go to alternative therapists, and there were more people going to alternative therapists than their primary care physician. And the insurance company started looking at that and said, well, we ought to add a chiropractor, we ought to add a massage therapist, and we ought to add that. It never comes from the top, the changes that you're talking about, that we want. It's not going to come from government. It's going to come from us, and it's going to come from the people in local communities that says enough is enough.
And I see a little bit of that happening here in Santa Fe and in New Mexico. I mean, the repeal of the death penalty was huge. I mean, with my access to first radio and now TV, I've supported that issue for 10 years, and it's been going on a lot longer. And finally, it happened. You know, the concept of taking the box off at least the government forms that ask, have you ever been incarcerated? The things like medical marijuana. I mean, some of that stuff is happening, and that's about, I see some hope there. But I mean, I know this show is one of the ways, that's why I do this show in a lot of ways, is to get that message out that we've got to change the way we see things. We take it to the streets. I mean, that's I'm an old hippie, and that was what we used to do.
So here's an example. I worked in the prison in California, CRC, California Rehab Center in western Riverside County. And through a fortuitous set of circumstances, I was able to set up a therapeutic community inside of a state prison. And it was going to be 1/3 Mexican mafia, 1/3 neo-Nazi skinheads, and 1/3 Crip gang members, some Watts. And that was my task, is how to do that. And I knew enough sociology to know that you have to have some catalyst, so that you just can't expect them all to come into a unit and play well together. And so what we did was, under my suggestion, is interview 120 lifers and choose 7 lifers that represented the different ethnic populations and had them go through a training. And they became the mentors of, we brought in cohorts of 15 at a time in this prison. I was the director of it. I hired the staff, I trained the staff, and after about 3 or 4 months, one gang member from Watts, from Crips, said to a neo-Nazi skinhead, "If you need help, you can come to my bunk and I'll help you." Now that's unheard of. It's because you can get killed out in the yard if you cross those ethnic boundaries. They made that unit drug-free, and they threw out all the weapons on the ground. And I was in literally tears after I saw it, because they kept doing it. They kept helping each other. Because I helped them express their pain. And one day I asked them, "Could you please share the death of someone you loved?" And so they did, and they all started crying in prison. All of them started crying. And they said, "We need more of that work to release the pain that they're carrying." And so that really blew my mind. Then I said, "You are the guys that when you go back to the community, you can work with the young kids in your community. Because if you transcended this here, you can do it on the street." And I tried to arrange that through probation. When you get out, it's parole, I forgot which one it is, when they go back into the community there. So things like, but there has to be a process of transformation to have them experience that, so that's something they want to do. And if they want to do that, then it will happen.
Is the program still ongoing?
No, I left there in '97, but it lasted 2 years without the founder, me and another person there, and the recidivism dropped from 70% to 10%, and that's documented. That's the first time that happened in California prison system.
But they didn't sustain it?
No. No.
So are we stuck with, I don't know, I mean that's the wrong term, but people have visions, and if they don't stay, the vision gets lost?
It takes ongoing, and they weren't willing to support the cost to keep the program going. And there wasn't enough political support because I was gone, the other director was gone, and so forth. But they kept it going for 2 years. And inside a prison system, that's pretty miraculous in itself. So there needs to be ongoing commitment, it needs to be funding. But money is not the answer. But everyone says we need more money to do it. No, you need consciousness, and you need the vision, and you need people that have consciousness implementing the program. It's not the money. But everyone's trained to
the money is there. It depends how we want to spend it.
Right. And conscience doesn't require money.
Yeah. But even if it did, it's there.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, instead of putting all this money into to just warehousing people, it would be more efficient.
The other effects were that there were other correctional officers that reapplied to be reassigned. The turnover rate was less, the absenteeism was less, because, like me, I couldn't wait to get to work every day inside of a state prison. Well, if you generate that feeling, then you don't have the correctional officers freaking out. They buy into it, they see what's happening, and they like that, and they feel it's more meaningful rather than just being the bad guy there. So it's possible. I would love to repeat that experience. And I love to work with veterans, because you can do the same thing with veterans with PTSD.
Well, I mean, every one of us, I think, in one form or another, suffers from PTSD. Yeah, I mean, to me, in my own practice, I define abuse on its most broadest terms. Abuse is any time a child and their behavior are made to be one. And that means, like, instead of telling me, "I love you, Phil, I have a problem with what you just did," it's, "What's wrong with you? Why can't you get your room clean? What, are you stupid? Can't you get good marks on your report card?" So the child is being taught they're not okay, and they're taught to perform to somebody else's standards, and you start not believing in yourself. You don't trust yourself. You don't trust your trusting and your knowing. To me, that's trauma. That's abuse. It's not. measurable, clinical,
There's
you know,
no
DSM-4.
bruise that you can see, but inside there's bruising.
And those are the ones that last the most permanently. Young people, because you start to believe that I'm not okay, I'm not going to be okay. I mean, that's why I used. I didn't think I was okay or that I would ever be okay. You know, and
I just saw a brochure for the first time. It's a brochure about a workshop called Low Self-Esteem, LSE. I never saw that before.
Yeah.
So now it's being recognized and addressed. Low self-esteem. How many people suffer from that? You know.
I think most of the world.
Yeah. Because of the values, because of lack of awareness and consciousness, because of so many different things.
So the answer is, in some of going back to the very beginning, we talked about the answer is about how do we, on a large scale, enhance the spiritual presence in the world.
Well, I think you got to start in local groups and with individuals. You can't mandate a world to meditate, but you can start with your own practices. And if something's good, people want to know about it, and they ask you, oh, you look so good, you look healthy, you handle stress, how do you do that? And let it be organic that way. Let it happen that way. And there's enough people starting to do that. When I first started doing yoga, there was like 20, 30,000 people in America in 1970. Now there's 30 million people doing yoga. Well, that's pretty amazing. You know, so people see the results and so forth. And the same thing with holistic health. When I started, you couldn't find an acupuncture covered by an insurance company 30 years ago, and now they're in most of the policies. So that it has to be fed and supported that way. That's
right. And there's no reimbursement for that because we offer yoga, we offer acupuncture and meditation. Nobody's going to pay us for that, but that's just the right thing to do.
And that, I mean, I hear all this, and you know, maybe it's my own impatience, but I mean, I do a show every year from radio now onto television. There's a saint of a woman. Her name is Ruth Hoffman, and they've changed their name. I think it's Lutheran Governmental Ministries, but they're an advocacy group of the Greater Lutheran Church, there's one in each state. And for every year now, so this has been about 11 years I've had her on my show, she goes and advocates for the people who have no voice at the state legislative session each year.
I've heard of her, yes.
Basically, from the first year we did this, so it was probably 2000, up until now, I could have used the same outline and the same script. The only thing that has really changed, the only thing we've taken off of that script, so to speak, is the death penalty. And it's like, I couldn't do that. I mean, I know there was a line in the Eagles song, change comes slowly if it ever comes at all. I just, you know, for me, I don't, maybe it's that's still that addict part of me that too little. We need to speed this process up. We got too many people who are being disposed of, who are dying needlessly, who are wasting life. And I know there is no magic answer. I just keep looking for one. You know, and that's why I do this show. You know, just the greatest thing could possibly happen was be no need for this show anymore. Yeah. I used to say that when I worked in treatment. That would be the greatest thing, that they don't need for my services anymore. And we were watching people have sex in the laundry room and saying, well, there goes the next generation. So we're going to be running down on time. I have to make an announcement. I got so sidetracked. Give me a few minutes to make an announcement.
Sure.
They'll come back with some parting thoughts. So our good friends up at Unity of Santa Fe, which is 1212 Unity Way, which is exit 12 on Highway 599, is presenting Kevin Blackwell, who is a gifted spiritual teacher who at the age of 16 experienced an unanticipated awakening that gave him the ability to communicate with discarnate beings. On Friday, March 5th, Kevin will share his story of his 28-year journey to awakening and shed light on 2012 and the global transition that is occurring. There is a suggested love offering. We can't mention money on the air. For time and more information, because they didn't give me the time of the event, call Unity Santa Fe at 989-3643, box number 3, or call Nancy Holtzman, who is the program manager, at 989-4433. So that's this coming Friday. Also, to let you know, next week we're going to have Amber and Rowan, who are two high priestess of the Wiccan coven up in Los Alamos called Our Lady of the Woods. We're going to talk about Wiccan and shamanism and what they are and what they're not. So tune in for that. If you haven't already gotten the gist of it, I am a counselor. I do spiritual counseling, which is, my belief is, without a spiritual component, there is no healing. So I incorporate some traditional therapeutic tools with a spiritual healing practice, and if you think that I might be able to help you, if you're having problems with life or addictions or any such thing, be happy to sit down and talk with you. My services are on a donation basis, so money is not an issue. My number and my email are being flashed on the screen, and it'll be at the end of the show, so I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to work with you. That's what God's put me on this planet to do, I believe. So, parting thoughts. You open? You could.
To close.
You don't have to close.
Well, we just continue to do our part and continue to model that love and compassion, and one person touches one person, and then that other person touches another one, and before you know, you have a community. And we're working on building that community at our place and on a personal level as well, of loving kindness and compassion. There's no other way to be.
Let me just, before you decide to, let me just ask both of you the same question. You remember the old, there was a book, The 100th Monkey?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I heard that was at some point proven to be totally fictitious. Do you really believe that can happen, even though that book was not the... Can we put out a level of energy that touches other people and transforms?
We do all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that is possible.
Absolutely. I see it every day.
Yeah, we do it all the time.
Okay.
It's just a question of reaching a critical mass if it's meant to be. If it's in divine will, then it will happen.
Isn't there free will that could override divine will?
Yeah, then they need to come and talk to you.
I mean, can we not create a level of grace that's, doesn't have to wait for God's divine timing, that we create our own God divine timing because we are God?
Right, by our own being.
Yeah. So do you have a parting thought before we say goodbye?
Yeah, it relates to the first thing you read by the gentleman there.
What sustains you from the inside?
And I thought about that a lot. And so what that is for me is, no matter what, I'm worthy of love. I don't have to do anything. Just be.
Just be. We are human beings, not human doings.
That's right. And the word human being actually means hue, it's color, being. It really means being in the light of God. That's what the etymology of the word human being means.
Okay, and with that, we got to put a wrap on this. Sadhu, thank you so much. Dr. Briscoe, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope that you got something out of this. If you have or you haven't, talk about it. Call us, contact us, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, talk to your loved ones. Let's start some momentum going here. Remember, the question is, what sustains you from the inside? Mm-hmm. If the answer is not the divine, keep asking the question. Mm-hmm. Till next week, love and light. I'm Reverend Phil, and I've been your host for Words of the Prophets. Thank you for tuning in. Please join me again next week, same time, same channel, for more Words of the Prophets.